just joining us for the first time, so good to have you here. And for you repeat Togetherness seekers, we couldn't be more ecstatic to have you. Yes, and please share where you're calling in from using the chat function, which is either on the bottom of your screen if you are on a desktop, or at the top if you're using some type of iPad. You can push the chat button and share where you're calling in from, and maybe one thing you're looking forward to this weekend. So hello, France. It's great to start out with some international representation. Hi, Nancy in Baltimore, in Oakland. Yes, looking forward to a hike this weekend. Me too. Today is an extremely exciting session, to be honest. We're going to be talking about the concept of awe and finding awe, and the people that are going to be helping us do that are incredible. And you're already speaking about some awe-inspiring things in the chat here. You can find awe in hikes, and we'll talk about that more, and in nature and the things that make us feel small, like the sky. It's so great to see you in LA and North Carolina and San Francisco and Washington. Fabulous. We're going to get started in just a couple minutes. And please introduce yourself if you're just zooming in. If you have questions, as per usual, feel free to use the chat button for those as well, and we can help you get your audio or your video set up, or figure out how to use this both horrifying and connecting technology that we're all a part of together. In this case, today on Zoom. Hi in Portland and Mount Shasta, Marin. Hearing the surf. Is it someone's birthday do we have? Is it Dan's birthday? Happy birthday, Dan. Dan's such an important voice. We see him here, and it makes us so excited that you're participating on your birthday. Our birthday love to you. Fabulous. People are just getting going. Dan, and yes, it's a pleasure to celebrate anything we can in this day and age, and a birthday is a big one, so that's great. Hi, North Carolina. Here it's a good day for an adventure. Well, this is the right day when we're talking about adventure. You must have maybe read the Stacy's bio, because that's part of what we're talking about. So, all right, shall we get started then? I say we do it. So, welcome everyone to your dose of togetherness on this Friday. My name is Brad Wolf, and I am the executive director and the founder of Reimagine. And as a nonprofit organization, we work really hard to spark community experiences like this one that empower individuals and families and communities to face the hardest parts of our existence, namely illness and death. And grief, while inspiring people to celebrate life and one another. So on behalf of the entire Reimagine team, and on behalf of our incredible partners at the Greater Good Science Center at UC Berkeley that helps spark this initiative, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to another Friday together. First things first, once again, there she is, Dara Cosberg, my incredible colleague. She's teaching us some things about Zoom that many of you have already figured out, which is great. If you are distracted by the chat function, which is a button on the bottom, you click that button and you're sharing where you are calling in from, and we'll use that later in the session to communicate with each other in various ways. Oh, look, people are drawing on Dara. There you are. I like that. That's a good addition to the photo. If you get distracted by the chat, feel free to close it off by pushing a button on the top right corner. Please keep your cameras on if possible during the session. There's a button for that too, on and off. If for some reason you're having a slow internet day, or you have to call in, use your phone, and there's a number that was placed in the invitation, which you can call. It gets you here via audio. And when you are in the breakout rooms, and yes, there will be breakout rooms, you can hear everyone by pushing *6, which unmutes yourself. And again, in the breakout rooms, you're going to also want to turn off the mute button so you can hear each other. Great job. I don't know what artist this is who's joined us today, but we're really taking it up a level. So thank you. All right. So with that in mind, let's get going. We're going to start off as we typically do with grounding and inspiration. And we are delighted to have someone special with us that we met through the togetherness circles, the breakout rooms at the end. Belinda was in a group with Dara, actually. When Dara uncovered the special fact that Belinda, who was a Bay Area teacher, a community builder, and a social entrepreneur, she has founded this incredible organization called Gratitude Blooming that combines art and nature and reflective inquiry into inspiring gratitude-based tools and experiences for personal insight, and has developed something that she's going to share with us today that we can all use together to experience more gratitude. And it just seemed like so synergistic to how these relationships form. And then you're our first participant turned special person. I don't know what role we call this, grounder, inspiration, leader. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to Belinda, and looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much for participating in what you're bringing to us.
Thank you, everybody. Well, welcome to this Friday together. So let's just take a minute to just look at the beautiful screen of people, the mosaic of faces, and just say hello with our eyes before we get into our gratitude meditation. So just acknowledging the beautiful people that are here today, joining us in this moment. So while we're getting present, just notice your awareness on your body. And if you need to adjust a little bit to be comfortable, so part of feeling grounded is just being comfortable in our bodies. So just take a minute to, if you need to kind of shake it out a little bit, just release anything in your body, feel free to do that. For those of you that need a little bit more extra grounding, I suggest just putting some awareness on your feet. So if you're sitting, really notice how your feet are planting on the ground. And for me, I'm gonna stand just to give that extra energy of the earth, that feeling. So let's start our meditation by just gradually closing our eyes and just tuning inward, just traveling from this beautiful circle to our inner world. And gently close your eyes, and let's take a few really deep cleansing breaths at our own pace. Just imagining as you inhale this new energy, this new vitality of the day, and exhaling anything that's stuck or any energy that you don't want to hold on to today in your body. So we're just going to do a couple rounds of just really grounding breath together. So let's just begin with that inhale. New energy, new vitality coming through our bodies. And exhaling anything from the week that we don't want to hold on to anymore. And as you breathe, imagine you are a big, strong tree. Maybe it's a tree that is really close to you that you see every day, or maybe it's a tree that's coming to you in your mind right now. Imagine yourself as that tree. With each inhale and exhale, imagine all that energy going to your feet and rooting down into the earth, deeper and deeper with each inhale and exhale. Imagine the roots of your feet going deeper and deeper into the center of the earth as you breathe. As your roots get stronger and more expansive, imagine your body feeling strong and full of life. And with this next round of breath, imagining our roots interconnecting in this great big community of trees today in this circle. Imagine your roots connecting with everyone else that's here on this call. And just feel that love and that vitality pulsing through your body and your feet as you connect with everyone else here and feel their energy and their aliveness. With each breath, imagining yourself more and more grounded, more and more connected with yourself, with everyone here, and the world. Each breath bringing us closer and closer together. And from this place of love and connection, send out a blessing of gratitude to yourself, the people in this call, or someone in your life. Just send it out from your roots and your branches as this big, wise tree. And just take one more minute to hold that feeling of grounding and connection within you as this great tree. And just remember that at any point in your day or your weekend and in your life, you can always return to this place of groundedness. and aliveness just by remembering this tree within you. So with your next breath, gradually take time to transition from your tree to you, to this circle, just gradually giving yourself time to return back to this space. And for those of you that are transitioning back, let's start where let's return to where we started by just looking at everyone here and imagining how connected we are as a beautiful grove of trees. And I'm excited to share two important themes that come from our Gratitude Blooming collection, and it's very connected to what Stacy's going to be talking about. Nature is such a source of awe and reverence, and so the two themes that we're going to focus on today are going to be the sunflower, which stands for reverence, and the root of the word reverence actually means to stand in awe. So we're going to sit with this question of what inspires awe in our life through Stacy's talk and through our own embodiment of nature. And another question we can explore today is also the Pasque flower, which is about destiny for us. And it's just noticing what makes us come alive and what we feel called to do. So in our breakouts, we're going to have time to really connect with these plants and these questions. So yeah, I'm going to pass it off to Stacy to inspire us today.
Actually, I would like to just chime in. First of all, thank you, Belinda, for such a beautiful meditation. Thinking about the trees, especially as a Californian, and the giant redwoods that we have here, and the awe that that creates for me, was very grounding, I have to say. And just wanted to point out these incredible cards that you've developed here as part of Gratitude Blooming, and that there will be a chance at the very end of the session, if I'm correct, an optional opportunity for everyone to, Belinda's given us a special access to try to work with and play and experience some of her work. So if you want to hang on when this is done, we're going to have an opportunity to dive deeper into some of these cards that are truly gorgeous. So thank you so much. And to your point, I do want to introduce Stacy for a minute. And I would like to keep these descriptions of who's presenting brief without too much context, but I feel like I want to share a little bit about Stacy because his background is just so powerful and beautiful, really, the journey that he's been on. In a nutshell, Stacy is the founder of Adventure United. He's also a husband, a father, a climber, and a skier. And he served nearly 7 years in the US Army with tours of Bosnia and Baghdad. And so thank you, obviously, Stacy, on behalf of all of us for your service. And following his return from war, Stacy then used climbing and skiing to overcome addiction and suicidal ideation. He and Dacher Keltner, who leads the Greater Good Science Center, he's the primary researcher at the Greater Good Science Center and studies awe deeply. Together, they launched the Great Outdoors Lab during Stacy's time as a director at the Sierra Club Outdoors to help understand the scientific benefits of time outdoors and the role the emotion of awe plays. Stacy is also a National Geographic Adventurer of the Year and a film producer with expeditions and films completed or in post-production on a number of countries, including Iraq and Afghanistan. And so just to say, it is our true honor, Stacy, to have you here with us and during this time to share your words with us. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I love the idea of getting people together and connecting and finding ways to share and joy and sadness and frustration. Um, Whenever I have an opportunity to speak about awe or on awe, I always try and jump at that opportunity. And we'll start, awe has a lot of different definitions for different people. How I got to kind of the science of awe and really beginning to understand awe. I came home from Iraq in 2007. So I joined the Army. I did Reserve Officer Training Corps at the University of Mississippi from 96 to 2000. And then after some training in Southern Arizona, I was stationed in Germany in Darmstadt. And then 9/11 happened. And if you were around during that time, if you remember what that was like, you may remember watching the towers fall and feeling that you're in the presence of something that challenged your understanding of the world, right? And for most of us, it was a very, very negative feeling. And at the same time, as a young, I was 22 when that happened, and we used to sing these cadences, and I'm sure they still do in the Army in the 90s, somebody, anybody, start a war. And so when 9/11 happened, there were a lot of us who were, reared up on that type of literature that honors and glorifies not only the warrior, but also the war, right? So war as a means of a rite of passage, war as a means of glory seeking, war as a means of becoming. And so I was pretty excited that I was going to get to go to war. And I didn't actually, for a variety of reasons. The unit I was in, and I didn't go. And I ended up in 2000, I didn't go to Afghanistan. And then because the Turks didn't allow for the Turkish community, the Turkish nation didn't allow U.S. troops to go through the northern border. And so my unit was supposed to do that. So I didn't go to Iraq. And I ended up in Sarajevo in 03, 04. I left that. I did some explosive ordnance disposal work in Angola in the former Soviet state of Georgia in a breakaway republic called Abkhazia in 2005. And then I got recalled at the end of 2005, and I went to Baghdad in 2006, 2007. And all throughout those times and those years, whether it was even playing rugby for a German rugby club, whether it was spending time in Sarajevo, and then certainly, in Angola, seeing landmine clearance and doing explosive work. And then, many times throughout that, I would look up and see a presence of something vast that challenged my understanding of the world, right? I partly intentionally wanted to put myself in those positions, but a lot of times those positions came at me, whether I wanted them or not. And then when I came home through a series of challenges, I struggled with addiction, I struggled with alcoholism, and a friend got me out rock climbing. And that really turned me around in the sense that it gave me something to focus on, right? Like it pulled me into the moment. And then it was also the views, right, that I saw from the top of the mountains, and it kind of took my breath away. Well, it did take my breath away. And I remember as a kid, I grew up in South Dakota reading Willa Cather. And the first time that I really fell in love with the mountains, I remembered a Willa Cather quote. And she said, anybody can fall in love with the mountains. It takes patience, I think, to fall in love with the prairies. And I thought back as a kid and remembered the times that the prairie had taken my breath away, oftentimes with thunderstorms rolling in, lightning, or those moments where the air and the earth kind of look like liquid together. If you've ever seen a big rolling grassy prairie or open space in the morning or late at night, as the day gives away to night, you may know that feeling and that experience. And I thought, man, the outdoors is so good, and this is the only thing that seems like it's really working for me and helping me deal with my trauma. I want to make sure this is available for everyone. And eventually I realized that everyone meant everyone, not just veterans, right? Because I think, especially in the United States, we typically allow three groups of people to feel trauma, which are veterans, first responders, and then sometimes breast cancer fighters and survivors. And other than that, you're really not allowed to feel trauma in the United States, right? We blame people for their trauma. We tell people to get over it. And there are some of those support groups, but kind of in the national conversation, we don't really think about trauma. And even as we look at trauma from a veteran perspective, the VA for a long time looks at trying to deal with the trauma from, you know, a combat or war experience. And so if you have developmental trauma before then, you're not really able to bring it up because the military can kind of deny it. And one of the hard things about developmental trauma, or any trauma really, is that we can look at it, you know, any traumatic event, a young child being left without loving touch, a young child being, you know, exposed to unloving touch or violent touch. All of those things are that feeling we get in the presence of something that challenges our understanding in the world and that is vast, right? And so one of the challenges with awe, I think, is that awe is an emotion. And emotions in and of themselves aren't necessarily negative or positive, right? Like if you were happy all the time and never knew sadness, I would argue that that would be a bad thing, right? Because oftentimes sadness helps us remember beautiful things in our lives, right? Like one of the amazing things I think Reimagined is doing is helping us rethink of death and our approach to death. And I've come to learn that if I have a sweet sadness about somebody and their passing, it's because I've really loved them and because I've had wonderful experiences in them, and how wonderful to feel such an emotion upon their passing from this realm. But I really wanted Time Outdoors to be available for all people, right? And I thought it needs to be a medical prescription as well. And there are a number of Park RX programs, which are really fantastic, and doctors and medical professionals encouraging people to get outside, but I wanted it to be a prescription in the sense that if you are struggling with stress or a number of things related to stress or depression or anxiety or trauma, that the doctor might say to you, you know, it'd be really good if you got outdoors, and here are providers, right? And you had a copay that went with a multi-day backpacking trip or paddling trip, and you were able to purchase hiking boots or ski boots or you know, rafting trip with your insurance. And there's a much larger conversation about insurance as well, and I won't make any assumptions about where you all stand on that. Leave it to say, I think everybody deserves access both to insurance and to the outdoors. So I said, well, how do we do this? And I was working at the Sierra Club at the time, and my boss said, well, you need to do the research. And I thought, well, that's crazy. Why do I need to do the research, right? There's thousands of years of human lived experience that's written down that talks about the importance of the outdoors, right? There isn't a single religious tradition that I am aware of that doesn't present the message from God or the above or the universe to whatever sense of prophets or message delivery that doesn't include time outdoors, right? And if we look at the major monotheistic religions of the West, in Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, we see that, right? We see Christ, you know, spending 40 days in the desert. We see Moses receiving the 10 commandments from the top of a mountain. We see Muhammad spending 40 days meditating in a cave. I mean, if we look at Eastern traditions, right? Buddha's, you know, witnesses the suffering under a tree and spends his time there. You know, Norse traditions and Hindu traditions are rife with these wonderful stories and engagements of nature and man. Greek traditions, Native American traditions, all over, right? I mean, if you've ever read Bruce Chatwin's book Songlines, it's one of my favorite books, right, about the Aboriginal experience in Australia and following the songlines that were written in the earth. And I live here in Utah. And even in Utah, right, if you're familiar with the Mormon culture or Latter-day Saints, Joseph Smith finds these golden plates, right? The angel comes and visits him, not in the shopping mall, but in the forest, right? In the outdoors. So we have this base human understanding that good things, revelation, happens in the outdoors. And awe, I think, you know, that's one of the, as we heard earlier, you know, from Belinda, is that when we think of reverence, we think of awe. You know, we're standing in the presence of awe. And what is that if not, you know, a higher power, or what is that? And as I moved through that, two things really happened. So one, people said, you need to figure out the research. And so we pulled together this research meeting. Long and the short of it is Dr. Keltner comes in late and he says, I want to do this research with you. And we decided that we would focus our research in the same way a lot of pharmaceutical companies did, in that we wanted to figure out what's the ingredient, what's the key ingredient, you know, for why time outdoors matters so much. And we zeroed in on the emotion of awe. And as we were doing that research, and we saw amazing things, and I'll make sure that you all have access to some of the research that we've done. But, you know, a night outdoors. We looked over the course of 3 years, we looked at about 72 veterans and 72 youth who were able to finish the research protocol. And we didn't ask people if they had PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, but we did look for symptoms. And about 80% of the youth and the veterans all had enough symptoms of PTSD, right? But oftentimes if you ask somebody, do you have post-traumatic stress disorder, they're gonna say no, or they think no, whether they have it or not. But when you start looking at the symptomology, right, people are oftentimes a lot more honest in responding to the symptoms. And we also found that a number of children under the age of 18 that were growing up in poverty, there's adverse childhood experiences survey, and if you score a 3 or more on that, you're at risk for trauma. And we found that the majority of those kids were already at or above the same levels of post-traumatic stress from a symptomology pattern as combat military veterans, right? And a lot of those young men and women and boys and girls were thinking about joining the military as a way out of their current situation, right? And so think about what we're doing to our communities in that sense. But what we found is that one night, in the emotion of awe, controlling for other variables, one night in the outdoors reduced post-traumatic stress by 27% and overall stress by 19% across the board. One of the findings that we didn't really have enough of because we weren't really looking for it, but it came through in a lot of the testimonials, was that it also improved sleep an hour to an hour and a half. So awe really matters. And then, you know, we're still moving down that research platform. One of the other things that I wanted to do with my own life is about 2014, I started thinking, what if I could go back to those places that gave me such a negative experience of awe through military and combat trauma? What if I went back and found the beauty in those places? So in 2015, I returned to Angola, and I went rock climbing with a guy named Alex Honnold. You may have seen Alex's recent film, Free Solo, where he climbs without ropes up Yosemite. And I came back from that trip, and one of the things that was really interesting there is so many of the Angolans were so surprised that we were climbing their rocks. Why would you come all the way from the United States? Don't you have rocks at home? Why are you climbing the rocks? Are there medicines on top? Are there special animals you're looking for, right? And you realize how privileged we are to spend time arbitrarily taking the most difficult route up a rock, right? And just smashing ourselves against it. But we said, you know, it's a beautiful place and we like to explore beautiful places. And it is, I mean, where we were in Angola, and I mean, everywhere in the world is a beautiful place. Like I've never not been somewhere and not been struck by the beauty of it at some level. Even Port Arthur, Texas, which is home to America's most refineries, has a certain beauty to it depending on where you look and how you look. And it's also set in the, you know, the Gulf of Mexico, which is such a wonderful, wonderful place. And somebody said, we looked up at the rocks and said to us, well, yeah, that is beautiful. I've never thought of it that way. And I think as I was thinking about this talk with you all, it is one of those things where sometimes the mountains and these beautiful things can actually be quite oppressive. And for those of you in the pandemic right now who maybe can see beautiful places but can't get to them, or you've had a negative experience in some of those things, we have to figure out, how do we take our feeling that, you know, challenges our understanding of the world, and what can we do in that feeling to find a positive narrative with it? And sometimes we can't, right? Like moments before this phone call or this Zoom call, I just had my head on my desk. Like I've had a horrific week. And as somebody who studies awe and works in awe and helps other people get awe in the outdoors, this is crushed. Like the pandemic has just annihilated my income, right? I make a living off helping expose other people to awe. And in a pandemic, that is a really challenging thing to do. And so I'm working, you know, in America's supply chain, chucking boxes on and off a conveyor belt every night, right? That's how I'm making a living right now. But even in that, as I was talking to another friend of mine, I found myself a couple nights ago in the flow state, right? If you've ever talked about flow, and the way that I was pitching boxes, these huge stacks of boxes, and they were all just exactly the right size. And I was able to get them and throw them, and they were just hitting perfectly in the middle of the conveyor belt. And I was doing it just for probably 15 minutes. And even that, right? This very kind of drawl, very mundane, physically challenging task. And I found myself in a flow state And looking back on it, I found myself in awe that even in these moments of duress, of frustration, of anger, we can find positive emotions of awe. We can find these things and surprise ourselves and our bodies and the world around us with the beauty that we see and the beauty we seek. And I think it's always a challenge too, in that, you know, we want to find awe and we want to find beauty. And oftentimes when we go seeking for it, we really, really struggle to find it. And so, you know, I think that's why it's so wonderful to start with this meditation and to try and clear the mind. And as you go out through your daily lives, be open for the beauty, be open for the awe. Set yourself in a place where you can see those things and you're vulnerable to the fact that your understanding of the world can be challenged, right? And kind of go seeking with that broad, soft gaze as opposed to that very narrow, microscopic viewpoint of let me find awe, right? And I think we can move back and forth with those things where we find beauty, because I also don't want to downplay any microscopes or anybody who's working at microbiology, because I remember the first time I saw a cell and I was, you know, maybe 9 or 10 years old, and my mind was blown away that something so small could contain so much. And with the universe, and you look at quantum physics and all that stuff, right? The deeper we go into an individual object, the more we realize it's just space. Conversely, the deeper we, you know, the further we pull out from Earth, the more we realize it's just space. And so I've had to really convince myself of some of those things and remind myself of some of those things during the pandemic, is just that, you know, this is just but a moment, right? It's just but a moment in our lives. And hopefully we can find, hopefully you all are given a little bit of the privilege to be able to sit with some of those things and think about awe and look at awe, and find those things in your daily work and your daily walk. And continue to find adventure, right? To that end, we've launched an adventure program. We're doing 4 days of adventure at home and together. So you adventure for an hour each day, and then we get together for a virtual campfire. And we found people have helped us and teach us, how do you find awe and how do you find grace, and all these different ways, and what does adventure look like? And I think for a long time, I thought that adventure had to be, you know, these big expeditions to go ski in Iraq or ski in Afghanistan, which is something I love to do and will continue to do when I'm given the opportunity to. But having a 4-year-old has helped me understand the amount of adventure I can have in a, you know, a block in my house or in the front yard or in the backyard. And it's been really fantastic, even without her, to try and replicate some of those things, because we all need time by ourselves. And it's wonderful to find awe corporately and together, but it's also, I think, just as equally important to find awe in a solo experience, and allow that to happen. So as we go forward, I think more and more, I think we're going to see at least a certain segment of the population fighting for beauty and awe. And I hope that you all join in that struggle and in that challenge to bring beauty and awe to more people, and a positive version of awe, because I think so much of the discontent with the world right now is people are looking up and they're seeing these challenges to the understanding of their world, and they're not marveling at the birth of a child. They look up at the millions of stars, and rather than finding those joyful, they find it oppressive. They look at the mountains like so many people did in Angola, and rather than in seeing the mountains as beauty, they saw the mountains as, you know, yet another thing standing in the way of progress or agriculture or food. So with those things, yeah, you know, I really was a little bit of a loss, and still am at a little bit of a loss of what I might be able to say here. It's been a rough week. I think we've all gone through ups and downs of the pandemic, continuing to get together. I'm in awe that this many people showed up from around the world for a Zoom call, and that I get to present to you and share this with you. I mean, that, like, when else would this have happened? When else would I get to meet Taida Beatty or Dan Brook or Laura G or Ali Boumassa, you know? And I'm just reading Indy Din. Like, when else would I get to meet any of you except for this pandemic? And so even in that, right, there's this wonderful, wonderful connection that's happening. So thank you so much for being awe-inspiring. Like, hopefully if you take away nothing else today, take away the fact that each of you are awe-inspiring, and you've inspired awe in me just by showing up. So hopefully you can adventure with us at some point. hopefully we can adventure together in the outdoors. And when you go out, remember that we're all with you, right? How cool is that? You know, think about some of these folks as you're in your breakout groups. Take them with you, and hopefully we'll see you with Adventure United, which I found out yesterday we have to change the name of that. Evidently, there's enough other Adventure Uniteds out there already. So we'll have something else soon, Adventure and Expedition, but you're welcome to book an adventure with us. Right now, they're pretty much all more or less free. We're doing some research on there. And so if you want to be part of that adventure research and that awe research with UCSF and figuring out how even at-home virtual adventures can bring us awe and bring us joy, we'd love to have you. So thank you so much. And keep doing what you're doing, and we'll see you out there, and we'll make a better world together.